I want to discuss Anita Sarkeesian's links and resources on women as background decorations, Part 1.
Studied extensively. Research has consistently found, studies have found, researchers have also found.
Have the effects specifically related to gaming been studied enough, or are you talking about other forms of media? I want to break down one of the studies she cites. One of your studies is a legitimate study that was published in 2009. It examines the short-term cognitive effects of playing these games on male players. However, it reads fewer empirical studies have explored the effects of playing games that are overtly sexual.
Studied extensively.
It means more studies need to be done. Unlike traditional media, only a handful of studies examine the effects of sexual content in games.
Studied extensively.
Correlation does not prove causation. Sexual effects of traditional media does not prove the same to be true with games. People who conduct these studies understand that. Very little research has been conducted to test the effects of exposure to overtly sexual content in video games.
Studied extensively.
Future research should examine long-term effects. The effects of repeated experience on players' cognition, emotional, attitude, and behavior should be addressed.
Studied extensively.
They used one sexually oriented video game called Leisure Suit Larry. Although the game chosen in the present research was a popular game, the use of a single game may have limited the generalizability of our findings.
Studied extensively.
Video game playing experience should be considered in future studies. In addition, the interactive nature of video gaming may also result in dramatic differences in terms of video game content as experienced by different game players.
Studied extensively.
This one study lists a ton of variables that have to be accounted for when it comes to proving the effects of games. People who conduct these studies understand their limitations. This study does have merit, but it also acknowledges its limitations. It also has 63 references. You only have 12. Are you providing enough research to prove the effects on people when it comes to gaming? I want to cite this article about a Supreme Court case in 2011 about violent video games. In June 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that video games enjoy full free speech protection. But here's what it says about actual research. The Supreme Court also referred to psychological research on violent video games as unpersuasive and noted that such research contains many methodological flaws. Recent reviews in many scholarly journals have come to similar conclusions, although much debate continues. In order to prove the effects of violent video games, you need more research on violent video games.
Studied extensively.
I don't see enough research here to prove the effects these games have on people when it comes to sexually explicit material. Some of the references here don't even pertain to gaming. The link to Stanford News talks about a study on women in avatar bodies, but the actual study lists the limitations.
Studied extensively.
These findings are limited in that they were obtained from mostly college-aged women. At this age, sexuality and mate attraction are particularly salient, and these variables likely influence the user's experiences. Also, the fact that this sample has accessed a college education may have influenced their attitude and behaviors towards sexuality and sexual display. Future research should consider a broader sample of women as well as adolescent girls.
Studied extensively.
Going back to the Stanford News article, I found it ironic that you link to an article that talks about you at the bottom. It also links to an article that talks about you. Should it matter that you cite material that cites yourself when we're talking about scientific studies? Because this is an article about a scientific study. Personally, I would have just linked to the study. Then this Polygon article. This is an opinion piece on the overuse of brothels and strip clubs in games. It even says opinion at the very top of it. It even links to articles like this. What does this have to do with gaming? You made this video in 2014, but announced you were making it in 2012.
I'm going to create a series of 5 videos. This new video series will primarily focus on tracking 5 stereotypical representations of women and the most common trope in video games, women as background decoration.
Did you actually research this topic thoroughly? Look at the year of your references. You made this video in 2014, but announced you were making it in 2012. Yet some of your resources didn't exist back then. This would not be an issue except for you made claims in your Kickstarter about how games affect people.
Unfortunately, in addition to all of these benefits, many games tend to reinforce and amplify sexist and downright misogynist ideas about women.
Reinforce and amplify sexist and downright misogynist ideas about women. If you say it amplifies and reinforces these ideas, does that not imply that people would have to be affected by the message of these games to have those ideas reinforced? Are you implying that these games had that effect on people who played them when you made that statement?
Many games tend to reinforce and amplify sexist and downright misogynist ideas about women.
If you made that claim back then, should you not have been able to prove your case back then? To put it into context, if I were a backer and you told me you wanted to research whether or not there was a problem with how games affect people, I would have funded you your thousands of dollars. If you claimed these issues already exist, I would have demanded your research before I funded you.
Many games tend to reinforce and amplify sexist and downright misogynist ideas about women.
But several of your references didn't exist back then. You claim it is well researched.
Studied extensively.
You cite material that cites you when it comes to scientific studies. And I see discrepancies in the claims in your Kickstarter video and some of your real-world research.
Many games tend to reinforce and amplify sexist and downright misogynist ideas about women.
You said this in 2014.
Compounding the problem is the widespread belief that, despite all the evidence, exposure to media has no real-world impact.
A widespread belief you had in 2011.
There's often a lot of hostility towards watching TV, like it's this big, bad, horrible thing that's going to warp our brains, but I don't think that's true.
Why should we believe you changed your stance on evidence? These questions concern me, because you are claiming this to be an
Educational tools.